I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I'm in New York City. Andrew Kuo is in New York City, but he was jet-setting across the country, like a true member of the jet-setting community. What was LA like, Andrew?
Wow, it was a whirlwind tour, man. I took off, I did some stuff, and then I got back on a plane and came right back to New York. Like, I think I was on a plane as long as I was on the ground.
All right, you were wild for that, but what's happening in LA? What's the vibe in LA from your 6 hours on the ground or whatever it was?
The vibe is strong, man. It is a weird place. So I grew up in New York City. LA is one of the strangest places to me. Maybe only because of reputation. Of course, there's New York, there's LA, there's Miami, and maybe Chicago. I claim Chicago's been demoted as one of the cities people frequent in America. I don't know. Still a strong city, but you know what I mean. And so, I think about LA quite a bit. A lot of friends there, a lot of people talking about it, a lot of politics happening. And then I go there, and it's just like a suburb with a downtown. And
Wow.
I walked from I had an art show out there. That's the reason I was out there, was for an art show in a place perfectly named Mid-City.
Oh, I thought you were sent out there by Cookies Hoops as a Tinseltown correspondent.
I was,
spent
right.
a solid 7 hours checking out the City of Angels, and then you came back here to report.
I had to do a vibe report. I hit up Ladiv, did that vibe report. We hit up Bonnie's, did that vibe report. And then I had to go to Sunset just to see what was going on.
What's the story with the Viper Room?
My friend had a dinner there, and he was in the same room with Al Pacino and John Carpenter having dinner. And which is an age-appropriate combo, but surprising to hear. I guess like all famous people hang out with each other. Is that true? Can I just say that? Both movies.
Yeah. You can say whatever you want, Andrew.
Do you consider John Carpenter one of the great filmmakers in history?
I don't know, but if someone wanted to make that claim, I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, me too. Great musician too. Scary as hell movies, man.
Yeah, again, that's a taste thing, but if you put him in the pantheon, you put him in the pantheon.
Yeah, and just quick Pacino vibe report. He's still looking like Keith Richards. I guess a silk scarf, huge shoulder pads, kind of a rundown look. Not quite derelict, but
he's kind of in the news cycle, if only because Heat 2 came out as a novel, which makes you think of the character that he portrayed in Heat 1.
When the heat's around.
So I've seen a lot of people reading Heat 2. I mean, that's not going to be me, because that would require reading, obviously, and I take a Ayatollah approach when it comes to the written word,
except for
novels,
one book.
Things like that. Well, yeah, except for the only book worth reading. Yeah,
The Joy of Basketball, available at your local bookseller.
Oh, I was talking about the Satanic Verses, but
that too.
Joy
Okay,
of
so
Basketball.
2 books.
Mm-hmm. But so you were here to report that L.A. is a weird, wild place. That's what you've come up with.
On my way from my hotel to the gallery, it was like I Google mapped it. It's like a 30-minute walk. I'm like, cool. I have some time. Maybe I'll grab a taco. I'll just get there. Classic New York City mistake. Classic New Yorker mistake. It was like long stretches of nothing, like kind of rundown businesses that were like upholstery. It's like tire fixing that were all shuttered, but I assume were open. And it it was a wasteland of things to see, and albeit maybe I was not in the right neighborhood, but like LA's huge, so I cannot keep track of where I can walk and can't walk. But it was a miserable time. That walk, I had a great time in LA. Period. But
I remember being out there, and I was staying in Skid Row area of like downtown LA, but I was specifically pretty much in Skid Row. Like, you walked a couple blocks around there. It qualified for sure. It was like an Airbnb. It was a nice place. And
is that near Grand Central Market?
I guess. I don't know. I don't know the geography of LA that well.
Okay.
But it was downtown LA, right? And
Right.
I did the same thing. I looked at a little Google map, and it said, all right, this is like a 20-minute walk to some restaurant along like 5th and Main or somewhere around there. I was like, all right, cool, yeah, I can walk that, whatever, man.
Yeah.
And within a block, and it was at night, within a block, someone had pulled a knife on me and was scraping it along the ground, screaming at me. And I'm like, 1 block?
Wait,
Like,
someone had a knife and was scraping on the ground like the Warriors movie?
Yeah. It was. This was in Skid Row. It was someone with mental problems, self-medicating, but was out there with a knife and was scraping it on the ground, yelling at me. And I was just kind of like walking along, thinking, man, I mean, I've been on foot for for like a minute and a half. It wasn't 5 blocks in. Wasn't on the way back. It was just immediately there's someone scraping the pavement with a knife, threatening me. I'm like, God damn it. So I just like walked and kind of kept a brisk pace and was like intently listening for like any footsteps gathering speed behind me, at which I would just sort of hightail it off. The rest of the walk went without incident, but I feel like I sort of learned a lesson that day.
Yo, you just reminded me of what happened this weekend. So I was walking on a street, nothing, and there was a liquor store, and some person in need was out there asking for money. And he's like, yo, do you have any money? I'm like, sure. And I gave him $10. And then 5 feet away, I hear him yelling like, yo, dude's got money. Everyone, he's got money. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get jumped, man. I mean, obviously I didn't. It was a mixture of happiness from him just being like, cool, I got $10. But also me reading it as just like, oh, this is the chance of getting mugged just went from 0 to like 5.
In my opinion, that guy violated.
Yes, I agree. He violated the code a little bit.
Like, you gave him some money, more than he's used to getting, and that was a really generous, gesture on your part. And then he immediately targets you for a robbery.
Yes. And I it was broad daylight. It was chill. But like, I was like, yeah, was a code broken just there? Or is there a code to this at all? I feel like there kind of is, right?
To me, there are a couple. It's hard to say codes because we're talking about a lot of people who are unwell, and it's hard for them to follow any sort of societal codes
I agree.
whatsoever. That norms don't apply to them in many different ways.
Right.
But I do think, like, if you are asking for money, you can't get mad at people. To me, that's bullshit. Now, again, you see it all the time. People are unwell. But to me, like, if you're going to sit there and say, like, hey, man, you got like an extra $1, and someone says, no, I don't, sorry, and like acknowledges you, nods, says, sorry, I don't, and you're like, fuck off. I'm like, all right, that's a code break. You can't do that.
Right.
You're like,
it happens all the time, but yeah.
Constantly. If someone's ignoring you, you can curse at them as they walk away. If they don't acknowledge your presence as a human asking for a little change. But if someone says, hey, sorry, I don't, you're like, suck my D. Like, come on, man. What the hell? Like, you're asking for a favor. You can't, There was that one guy on the train, that young kid who used to always be on the L, and he would walk around and he would get increasingly angry as he walked around on the train. Yeah. Like, oh, you fuckers won't give me any money. You won't give me any money. Look at you, all rich. Won't give me $1. Seriously? None of you guys are going to give me $1? And you're like, will someone beat this guy's ass and just get him off the train? Don't give him $1, though. He does not. He is violating the code of conduct.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, the summer is an intense time of year, but like, I go to my favorite local pizzeria that has no line, and there was a guy who was like, "Yo, will you buy me a slice?" And I had to go in there and ask the guy. I was like, "Is it okay if I buy him a slice?" He's like, "It's fine. The guy's nice, but like, thanks for asking because like, it gets hairy." And this pizzeria is awesome. I've seen them give pies to people like on the street, and like, they're great, but it is confusing, right? And there are like certain rules that keep on changing depending on where you're at, what kind of situation it is. And it's not as simple as it may seem to me. But what happens when you give someone, like someone asks for some money? I'm like, cool, no problem. I take out my wallet, which is like a rubber band basically, and a bunch of stuff.
So you pop a band.
Pop a band, and I give them money, and they're like, wait, I see you have more money. Can I get a 20? What do you do then?
Again, to me, a bit of a violation, but also perhaps it's worth the gamble if you're them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I'll do it. Sometimes I'll be like, fair enough, buddy. You saw my 20, you can have it. Like, it's cool. But sometimes, like, and this is so petty of me, sometimes if the person's kind of rude, I'm like, no, just take the 5. Like, I'll see you tomorrow, I'm sure. But, like, I don't know. Is there a decorum?
Yeah, I mean, again, no norms apply to a large number of people within this population. So, like, there's nothing hard and fast, so to speak, here.
I know, it's so tricky.
Yeah. There's a guy who is an absolute regular at a sort of outdoor drinking place around here in Brooklyn, and he comes multiple times every night, and always goes by there. And he gets kind of abusive if people don't give him money. And you're like, but I see you here all the time. I've given you money many, many times. Right. And if I don't one night, and I'm not asking you to remember me, but if I don't one night, and you're like cursing at me under your breath, it doesn't really make me want to give you cash the next time around. And again, I'm only talking from like a business standpoint. I'm not saying there's any morality here like that. Right. But, one time I heard him use a slur for lesbians towards a woman who didn't give him money. I'm like, nah, that's not cool. You're asking for money and you're calling people slurs as you walk off. Like,
it's confusing, right? Because like you're talking about strategy, and I'm just like, well, that's tough to ask from somebody who is in need, right? Like, it's kind of like a skill that not everyone has, and maybe they don't have, and
it really shouldn't have any bearing on the situation,
right?
Because it should just be, do you want to help this person or not? Not are they abiding by your decorum for how they should be requesting help? Which is, of course, what we're talking about being a code. Like, it isn't even fair to have a code for this community, and yet we do live within a society, and we are talking about a strategy for them to get more cash in their hand, which we think would be a good thing, or at least make their lives better in their mind. I don't know.
I mean, it's a my bad kind of thing. It's just like I shouldn't be thinking about this stuff, but my brain automatically does that. But yeah, clearly it's not something that they should be thinking about. It's not something I should be thinking about. But it's just like, I think the world is interesting and interactions are interesting. So I'm just like, oh, that was kind of odd. And I'm like, I have to forget this stuff, man. Like, I cannot constantly do this because I'll just get swallowed up. Another interesting thing happened to me on the ride home from New York, from glorious JFK. I want your advice on this, if I did the right thing. So the cab, I get in, the cab's like, oh yeah, super friendly. It's like, I have no bags. I just have like a little, I brought like one t-shirt. And I get in the airport, and he's like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going here. When I arrive, he's just like, oh, I forgot to turn my meter on. Do you have cash? And I'm like, oh, sorry, man. I don't have enough cash for this ride. I was hoping to use a card. Everything's set up. It's a modern taxi and everything. It has all like the swipes and the taps and everything. And he's like, well, I forgot to set my meter. I'm really sorry. So, like, you give me how much I think I deserve. And I'm like, is this a socioeconomic experiment right now? Like, is this a podcast? Because it's basically like, pay what you want, right? And he's a really nice guy, fine trip. We exchanged pleasantries. Like, I had no beef with this guy. But then I was like, oh, I'm getting hustled a little bit because he's reading me. he knows I'm going to give him more money than I'm supposed to. He's like, you tell me what I deserve. How much would you give him?
Yeah, I've been in that situation. It's clearly just a hustle.
It's a hustle. And I know I'm being hustled.
For me, when I'm in New York and that happens, I'm like, well, I know how much this cab costs.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, you're
yeah.
taking me from the airport to this neighborhood? Well, I know that costs like, you know, $45 to $60, depending on traffic and whatever.
Right.
Like, I mean, yeah, if they do that, I'm offering you what I think the ride would be without the tip, and I'm not including a tip. And like, you can take what you want because you're just taking this off the meter. You're just collecting this whole cash. You're basically saying to the government, to your employer, to whatever, that like that this is off the record. So okay, I just don't believe people when they say I didn't set the meter. I just don't believe it's true.
Oh, it's a hustle. But he turned on the meter and he was like, okay, you don't have the right amount of cash. You have a card. I can do that. How much would you give him? Knowing it's a flat rate from JFK.
Oh, if it's a flat rate.
What is it now?
It was 65. Is it still 65? The thing is, I don't really go to Manhattan, so I don't have the flat rate thing.
Right. I mean, it's 52 now. So what I did, I gave him $70 because, and I know I was getting hustled, and I gave him more. I tried to kill him with kindness. I was like, I'm gonna give you a big tip because you're a nice guy.
Yeah, you're wiling on that. You should. I would always give him less.
Well, my rationale is, I don't know. Every time I travel, and will be a theme in this pod. I'm a short king. I'm also Asian, and I'm also like I have a vibe that is like kind of meek. I will admit that. I have glasses. I'm not whatever. I'm not a tough guy, but every time I travel, I feel like I represent everything I am. Everything you can read from me. He's Asian. He's clearly from New York, kind of, especially because I'm wearing a New Yorker hat. He is short. He is. I am all the things that I love because I am those things. I love short people. I love Asian people. Whatever. So I feel like I represent them every time I travel. Like I make sure I dress well when I fly, which is just like clean shoes, pants, and a button down. You know, very simple stuff. But I won't wear derelict stuff. And I'm very conscious of to be polite. I'm very conscious of to be on my best behavior because I represent people who sound like me and look like me. So when I'm being hustled in a cab like that, I'm like, you know what? People like me understand that there's a hustle and still appreciate what you do. So like if I walk away from the cab, you're like, I hustled that sucker, but also that was kind of nice of him. I can live with that.
I mean, I get that. I also think that it means that he's going to profile the next.
It's a double-edged sword, right?
Short Asian king and say, meter's off, my friend.
I told him I knew it was a hustle. I was just like, I know what you're doing. It's okay. You know, I was like, I've lived here for a long time, and this is a very simple thing. And he's like, no, I really meant to, turn it on, but I forgot. I'm like, that's totally fine. I believe you. Why wouldn't I believe you? That's all. Like there was no getting to the bottom of it.
I mean, I get that, but yeah, I'm if you mess up on the meter, I assume you're just somehow pulling off a thing where you're pocketing more cash. So I'll just give you a little discount.
Yeah,
I'll give myself a discount.
Yeah, it's a scam immediately when the driver's like, "Oh, I forgot to turn on my meter. You have cash?" I'm like, "Turn on the meter." He's like, "Fine," and he just flicks it on. But I don't know. It's a simple thing. I feel like that happens in every city. I'm not even profiling New York. But back to LA, man. When's the last time you went there?
It's been a couple of years. I got to get back there. We've got a lot of friends in LA. And friends in LA, you should go and check out Andrew's art show, which is up for another month, right?
Another month at Tanya Lighten Gallery, a great gallery in Mid-City. And it's around other awesome places too. Psyched to have this show. Bunch of new paintings. some basketball references in there, a lot of non-basketball references. But yeah, I really like LA. I don't want to. So when we started this conversation, I'm like, I had culture shock, as I usually do. But then like an hour or two into it, I'm like, I could see why people move here. Shout out to our buddy Luch, who's about to move there this month. Like, we'll miss him, but I get it. It's a place where you can chill. And I know driving is, if you listen to Cookies Hoops on Spotify, if you're a king and listen on Patreon, driving is a breeze, man. Just flip on some us two yammering about whatever. It's kind of a nice little reprieve from like the subways in New York City.
That's fair to say. Well, the rehearsal is finally over. Now, that wasn't the smoothest segue, but I was like, wait, let's talk rehearsal. It's time. We've skipped it a couple of weeks in a row, waiting for it to end so we could see how it culminates. At this point, I think we don't have to worry about spoilers since it ran on Friday. I think Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's fair enough. I think it's time to talk about the finale. Did you watch the final episode?
Hells yeah. But after a few people that I respect and trust were like, I loved him until that episode. He's a foul dude. Canceled in my brain. No longer a fan of Nathan Fielder. The rehearsal can go F itself. I'm like, yo, what happened? It's like, you gotta watch. I watched it. It was awesome. And I know what they were angry at. Should we do a synopsis of the last episode? Quick one.
The quick synopsis, and again, spoilers here if you haven't seen it yet, is that it becomes apparent that one of the child actors who does not have a father has become emotionally attached to Nathan as a father figure over the couple weeks they've spent together. And this is due to pretty intense sort of familial cosplay, if you want to call it that, where the kid is saying, I love you, Daddy. And Nathan Fielder is saying, I love you too, Adam. And after the time is up, when he's being replaced by an older actor and to play the Adam character in this experiment of raising a child, the kid sort of like freaks out. And he's like calling himself Adam, and he's calling Nathan Daddy, and he's crying. And the episode really involves Nathan trying to come to grips with the fact that his experiment has messed up a kid. Now, not necessarily in a permanent way, but has messed with a kid. Maybe that's a better way of saying it.
Sure.
Like, messed up is too harsh. He messed with a kid. And it's a small child who's, 6, 7 years old or something like that. Maybe 6, I think. And it's pretty clear that he's having difficulty figuring out what is real and what isn't. Or at least what he wants to be real and what isn't. And most of the episode is Nathan coming to terms with that. And then going back and seeing how could he have done this in a different way in the meta-ness that is this show with other rehearsals and other actors to avoid creating this kind of attachment from the kid. Is that a reasonable way of just describing it?
Spot on, man. You're shooting 100 from the field. That's correct. And like a lot of the response, I forgot it was Friday. I can't keep track of days, but on my Twitter feed, it was like, yo, Nathan Fielder's dead to me. And I'm like, yo, people are just like thinking about him. I forgot they had just watched the finale and they were really put off by it. And I met someone in LA who works in the biz, and they were like, that deeply, the parent of a child, that offended me in a deep way that I can no longer look at his artwork with the same lens. I'm like, yo, this is going to be a great episode. And it disappointed me in one way. The kid was clearly acting. The whole thing was fake. And even the kid's mom was like not the greatest actor. And I'm a skeptical dude. But first of all, no kid talks like Remy did in that episode. It was scripted and it was wonderful. And I think it was Nathan Fielder kind of taking back his real estate. I think when a difficult artist gives a budget that he's given, knows that this will be scrutinized in the way it will be scrutinized. I think he was like, oh, people are going to love this because I hit certain notes that are like clever and emotional. And then I'm going to mess with them again because like Nathan For You was not an easy show either. And when people say he's exploitative, they're right. But I think the cool thing is he revealed at the end, he's exploiting the audience, not his subjects. He's messing with a certain kind of viewer who has somehow believed his tricks. And his tricks were that this kid was hurt, that this thing is kind of real. None of it's real.
I don't know. I'm not as convinced in that this wasn't something he noticed, that he said this would be an interesting plot line that will reveal.
He's got you. He's got you.
Well, my thing is like he's obviously choosing, what to highlight.
He's the
and
editor
whether
and
that's
creator.
scripted or not. Right. So he can sit there and be legitimately saying to this kid, hey, bye. And the kid reacts a certain way. And he's like, okay, let's spin this off into a plot line. Let's bring the cameras to their house. Let's bring the kid there. The kid's going to mess up and call him daddy because he's been calling him it for 2 weeks. Like whether or not it's scripted and he's acting or it's like scripted in that this is the story and angle he wants to pursue, I don't know.
I don't feel like
I think that's what blurs the lines in this whole show is that he gets to decide which direction to take a storyline. Someone's just there in the class, and now we get a storyline in which he's, basically involving this person in creating an entire different narrative arc where it's like now this guy's moving into a different apartment with two guys who play guitars. Now I'm playing him in here and dressing as him. Like he gets to choose these, whether they're scripted or not, they're still being determined by and him as like the creator of the show.
And I agree with that. And I, even starting with Nathan For You, I don't see any chaos in his artwork. I don't think anything is like, and this happened and what? That's all fake. I think he controls everything. And not only does he control everything as it's happening, but what he eventually shows us is totally his creation. It's not based on real life. It is not figurative. This is not figurative artwork. I think he takes liberties. He's like kind of a cubist. He takes liberties with what happens. And I think he makes it explicit. He calls it the rehearsal. He presents to you the premise of his idea right away in a standalone first episode, right? He presents to you the beginning and end of the whole show in one show in the beginning. And then in the second and subsequent episodes, he goes through the process of repeating that concept, but in a longer arc. We shouldn't be confused that there's randomness here. It's a scripted show.
Why is there so much hand-wringing about the morality of this particular show versus every other reality show under the sun?
Right.
And I'm not just talking about the real world where you stick a bunch of people in a house with cameras. And you could say that this is, in some ways, the how many permutations you want to say remove from that idea of the reality show, because it's a house, because it's characters. It is in some ways the real world, but twisted several times over to come up with like a entirely different conceit. But also those ones where we're gonna marry two strangers, and they're gonna then go on this retreat with other married couples who have never met each other. Like, that's a reality show. That's not manipulative. That's not like, is Alone, where people go and starve themselves in the woods, is that not manipulative? I just don't know. All these ones, and there are some that are more sort of innocent or more goofy, but some of them are darker, and I just don't know why this one in particular. Is it because that it's like hipster adjacent?
I think
is that why? Is it because it's HBO?
This is a great conversation, and I hate talking about Warhol. It's been forever. But it's a Campbell soup can, right? You know, when you see it, or the Brillo box. When you see it, you're like, it's a Brillo box. Why is this art? I can just take a Brillo box and put it in a gallery. Can I be a famous artist? I'm like, no, it's intent. And you have to, art is intent. And you have to judge it by the context of which you confront it. And it's true with ready-mades. It's true with surrealism, everything. Artists have been battling this idea for hundreds of years. You know, our mutt, it's a toilet. But I think what Nathan Fielder does is offends people in a certain way because it asks to be taken seriously. And in my mind, it is thrown in the ring of a different kind of critique. And he deserves this criticism because he is shooting higher than Fuckboy Island, right? And not only is he aiming to entertain, which he certainly does a great job of, he's looking to reveal something and he's looking to mess with you. And that is different than a twist ending in a dating show. He's looking to upend the idea of theater, and in a very clever way. And I thought Nathan For You was a bit more clever. I think this one's more ambitious, but it's less hidden. I think he, as he's getting older, is like taking a straighter line, which is good and bad. But the way we look at this, like back to the finale, this is so carefully constructed. He shows you how much weirder he is than his subjects. It is so meticulous. How in the world would he let the last episode being like, and then something weird happened, guys? The kid thought I was his father. I'm like, I don't believe you. You've created everything to its minute detail. You've shown us what you're doing. And with a little smirk at the end, he's like, and I did not expect this. I'm like, right. He's doing a thing.
Yeah, to me, he is a better actor than I think we initially gave him credit for.
Are you sure?
He is.
I think he's a worse actor.
Or I don't know. You could be right. I'm saying I think he has created a persona of, stony, like impassive.
Yeah.
So
autistic,
that when he's autistic.
Yeah.
So that when he does show something, you're like, oh, maybe this is real. But again, to your point, who can say? Because he's created this idea that he's always being real, that he's not really acting.
Right. It's never been real. Right.
Yeah, no, I'm with you in that regard, but the idea that he's playing unfair, that he is manipulative, that he's messing with people. I mean, that is true in the same way that like Candid Camera did, but also at the same time, I think they even actively pushed that idea, or at least addressed it. Remember when on the show, the woman who was playing Angela says like, "Is my life the joke to you?" And it's like they're saying what they want the audience to hear them say. Like, exactly, she's saying what I think. And one of the niftiest tricks I think they do is that by having a replicant of one of the subjects say these kind of things in the same environment, in the same mannerisms, wearing the same outfits, also to Nathan in very similar conversations, it merges what they said and what the character said. Mm-hmm. When you think of Angela, like Angela called him a liar. We know Angela was hyper religious, but when push came to shove, Angela was like, "Hey, I'm out. Thank you for doing that. That was a really cool experience. I just don't know how this ends. Like I'm done here." She was totally chill. She drove off. She beeped the horn a couple times. She was totally chill. But because they did that situation where she freaked out, there's like a little part of you that thinks of Angela saying, "Is my life a joke to you?" And like throwing the vase on the ground and saying, "You're never going to feel anything." She didn't do that. She literally said thanks and drove off with like a polite little enthusiastic horn beep. She didn't do that.
Yeah, and in that sense, I think the rehearsal ends up being maybe not as good or as good as Nathan For You, because in Nathan For You he doesn't show you any of that. I think he gives us too much in the rehearsal. I think he he draws the curtain a little bit, which I wish he didn't. I wish he would let it feel more chaotic. But to me, the trick that you're talking about is real, and he does it, but it grounds the whole show. And I'm like, you should have just let us have those thoughts, the ones that we had in Nathan For You, which is like, this is wild, but why is this what he should be? That it, and then it just ends. The curtain comes down, and
this
I
goes
think,
back to even the first episode with Core, right?
Right.
Where that was the first time they employed that trick.
Right.
Where Nathan is talking to Core, and then he says, and he reveals that the quiz answers were basically piped into his brain.
He
in
tells
order
you
to
everything,
make him
right?
cheat. And then you see the response from the actor, and it was just like, "You're a bad person. This is all that." And then it cuts back to Nathan, and he's like, he doesn't reveal to Core that he gave him the answers ahead of time, and says, "I think you're a good person." And Core's like, "Yeah, I think you are too," or whatever it was.
Sure.
But again, it's dovetailed. You're like, now that Core is going to watch the show, is this how he's going to feel? And this is being told to us that that's actually how he's going to feel, because this is the actor representing him, because he never said any of that. But maybe he would, because of what we know. Anyway, it's a really devious trick to sort of put these thoughts and emotions and words into the shell of a character via a doppelganger.
Yeah, and I mean, we dropped all those words in the beginning, like when we talked about this weeks ago, like Nabokov and The Other and Ben Sinister. All those books kind of like are good ammunition going into a show like this. And when Nathan Fielder recreates the Alligator Lounge, note for note, detail for detail, he's telling you the intention of the show. So when we see repeated shots, and like film nerds probably get into this more than just like a layman like me, a tourist like me. But when he shows us shots of him staring at an editing booth and like surveillance cameras, and he's like pondering on purpose with his he's stroking his imaginary beard, he's telling you the trick, right? He's like, oh, include that shot in. So where's that shot of me staring at the surveillance? Like, make sure you put that in, and we're going to use that as our promo shots for the show. If you go look at articles, it's him in a dark room staring at these surveillance cameras. I'm like, he's showing us everything. So to think that he loses control in the last episode, to me, is a great trick of the artist. And to make us mad, he's been trying to make us mad forever. Like, that's his whole he is at his heart, I think he's a cynic, and that's why I love him so much, and then I stop, because I don't think I'm as cynical as him. I think I'm a more optimistic person than he is, by a little, not by much. But he is optimistic and cynical. But this show has a dark tone to it, and it's not the subject, it's us. He's mocking us, which I think is clever, and I'm okay with being mocked.
I do wonder what rehearsal 2, more rehearsals, will be like. Because at some point, the success of the show means that finding people who are outside even the periphery of understanding it and are willing to dive into that kind of experience, like, your pool becomes smaller and weirder. And then you're exposed to more charges of exploitation, of finding people who are on the spectrum and putting them in positions to look strange on TV. So I do wonder. I mean, look, I think it's a cult hit. It's not like Game of Thrones or some shit where 90% of people in America are probably aware of its existence. Like, the reach of this is far, far, far smaller. But I do wonder that, like, will this season make people think he's less exploitive or more exploitive, or that the whole operation is immoral, but ultimately he's not the bad guy because of how it ended, that he's a victim of this as well, which, again, I'm with you. I don't believe that at all. Like, I'm not buying, yes, at the end, he also thinks he's the dad or whatever. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, it's fake. and it's scripted. But yeah, I hear you, and like, I was really excited in one regard because I like when difficult artists like remain difficult. This is like a '90s ass theme, the most tranquil generation, Gen X. But you know, the idea of selling out. He's like, well, I went from this to HBO, and now people are gonna think I'm this, and I'm gonna throw this budget in your face. I think he mentions the budget at least 4 times in the show, and HBO by name. And I remember, I've told this story before, but I remember years ago, it was Biggie Smalls' birthday. And someone was like, I'm going to have a Biggie Smalls party. We're just going to like we're just going to listen to his music and like drink beer. And everyone went. And after like 30 minutes, people were like, oh, he's disgusting. This is misogynistic. This is violent. This is like not okay music. And I'm like, oh, right. He's a gangster rapper. Like truly, like, so I understand why he's not for everybody. He should exist in the margins more than he does, but like he's been popularized in the way that he's accepted as a legend, which he is. But I think about artists in the margins who can't get to that point, who like always remain like painters who don't have a certain kind of success, or definitely musicians or filmmakers, right? Like, it's not like Lars Van Trier ended up making Avengers. Like, he's one of the best filmmakers ever, but like, how many people can talk about breaking the waves, you know? Like, that's pretty niche stuff that is celebrated in certain circles as one of the classics. But I really enjoy, and I was really grateful for Nathan Fielder being like, you know what? I'm the same artist. I'm like, that was cool, man.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it succeeded in doing what it was supposed to do. It was morally ambiguous. It was confusing to audiences. It poked and prodded at viewers and kind of tried to say, oh, you think it's exploitive? Watch how exploitive we'll get, and then I'll try to turn it on you. And who is the butt of the joke? Is the butt of the joke Nathan? Is the butt of the joke the people who agree to be on the show, or is it the audience? And I think they're all candidates, and I don't think it's even that cut and dry at different times. It's like very eye of the beholdery in that way.
And I don't want to sound heartless. Like, I know that was a disturbing episode, so, but like, stuff, I like when stuff isn't totally easy, and I'm not like, you sheep, I don't see what you see. Like, I could very well be wrong, but that's how I read it. But I have intel. I know someone at HBO, and I heard the premise of the rehearsal, 2 more rehearsals. He's going to present a scenario where he's like, I'm just like a fun-loving guy, an ex-cop who enjoys the nightlife. And what if I became like in charge? Maybe even like the mayor of New York City. Like, what would that look like? What would that... Okay, let's throw in some vegan politics in there. Let's throw in some nightlife thinking. Let's throw.
So Nathan Fielder is at Zero Bond. He's surrounded by a cast of hucksters, hustlers, grifters, scam artists, con men, dingy hustlers. So there's an article here that came out today in the New York Times. It's called Eric Adams After Dark. It's giving Cinemax. Wow. A private table and tarnished friends. New York's mayor vowed to boost nightlife establishments in every corner of the city, but again and again, he returns to the same spot run by friends with troubled pasts. So they talk a lot about this place called Osteria La Bahia, which is run by Mr. Adams' close friends, Robert and Zan Petrosants. That may be a butchering of their pronunciation. Twin brothers who he has supported despite their tax debts, felony convictions, and a trail of legal troubles. And this is a Italian restaurant in Midtown. And apparently he went there, according to this article, something like 14 times in June. And this is where he holds court. And he goes there, they keep it open, people come in to see him. It's all very unclear throughout this story if he's actually paying for any meals ever, whether it's at Zero Bond, whether it's at this restaurant, whether it's their prior restaurant in Brooklyn, no one has any receipts at all. And this falls into the same storyline of, when I ran into the mayor, His Honor, at a Fashion Week event. And he was there with his crew. They rolled in, they got some free drinks, and then he said, I'm going to Zero Bond. And this is what he does. And he showed up at, was it a Valentino dinner? You name it, Eric Adams is there. But then he always goes and hangs out at these restaurants and hangs out at Zero Bond. And there was a good article, I think, on Artsy about Zero Bond as well, because of Eric Adams' proximity to that place. That ran last week, I think. No, ArtNet, I believe.
Annie Hamilton, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we didn't learn anything too new here, except it paints a really good portrait of exactly who Eric Adams hangs out with, and they are just what you would expect.
Yeah. I mean, it is Trumpy behavior, right? Like, it is some sort of... he's frolicking a little bit in his position. And, he warned us. Eric Adams was like, yo, I love going out. I love the night. I'm into all of this stuff. I'm telling you, I'm the mayor of nightlife. And you posed a good question. If that's the case, that we all understand that, is his job to be like a nightlife Batman, to go all over and protect all our nightlife citizens, or is he just like staying in one place, favorite place? He's like, I told you I'd go out, like I like to go out. And I thought he was going to help our community, if I could say we is in nightlife terms, with like legislation and maybe like easier ways to make a living in a frowned upon time of day, which is ridiculous, and put juice back into New York City where that juice maybe had gone away. Mayor Kochify this city again. And I'm not sure he's done that, but maybe just by his presence alone and his visibility, he is? Is that his plan? It's hard to own a bar.
But he's not doing anything for nightlife at all.
I have not seen it yet.
No, he has no interest in nightlife as like a culture or anything like that. It's just he likes being out and he likes being in bars and he likes hanging with his friends.
Getting the attention. Yeah.
Getting attention. Yeah, it's solely self-gratification when it comes to his interest in nightlife. He doesn't care about arts or performances or, scenes that would be, that allow people who say were persecuted or, mistreated in their hometowns to come to New York and hang out with a bunch of similar people and create great things. He doesn't give a shit about any of that. He just hang out at this one Italian restaurant with like a bunch of guys who have, felony convictions, and then going to this other place where he hangs out with financial people until like 6 a.m. or whatever the hell he does. Like, it's ridiculous. He doesn't do anything with nightlife at all. It's just him hanging out.
And he'll go to Fashion Week coming up. Like, he'll be photographed at a bunch of parties and like end up at the same place. Like,
but also the Fashion Week thing is just for, again, his own gratification. He wants to be invited to things. He wants to be cool. He wants people to say, "Oh wow, the mayor is here." Nothing to do with supporting art scene or nightlife or safe spaces, whatever you want to describe them. Not at all. But what I like was when you mentioned that there was a similarity to Trump is it's the cast of characters around them. He's not with these supervillains. He's with like hacks. And some people mentioned in the story, I'm not going to say any names, I've met some of them. Yeah. And like, they're deeply unimpressive. They're just like, fourth tier hustlers and scammers trying to sort of weasel their way into like culture and like to be around models or like hot people or celebrities. Like they're so similar to the people who surrounded Trump. They aren't ballers. They aren't like it's very low grade, the whole thing.
And it is such a Shakespearean scene, right? That was pretentious, but like, hear me out. It's like Trump, Eric Adams, they win their thing and they're like, yo, I have a duty now to on this planet. I have a higher calling. And then they go back to Mar-a-Lago or Zero Bond and be like, guys, can you believe I won that? And they're like, you're still kind of whack, but like, okay, we'll give you this. But until you're not that, like, we don't, everyone's like whispering, like, Mayor Adams, oh, he's useful now, so like, all right, send another bottle his way. But
One nice detail was that his regular meal is a $55 branzino. This is coming from the
he's a full-on
vegan,
pescatarian.
self-proclaimed,
Yeah.
who has premio sausages on deck, like
Shrimps.
with the fennel, spicy, sweet, you name it, premio on deck. But yeah, this is a self-proclaimed vegan who walks in and his regular meal is a $55 branzino. By the way, the rules for people who work in public service is that you're not supposed to take anything over $50.
Correct.
So his typical meal would seemingly violate the boundaries of his profession.
But remember, he's a
his
police
role.
officer, so the rules don't apply to him because he has a higher calling.
Anything goes when you're protecting and serving.
Kinda. I mean, he's hilarious, and like, I still think New York City is the best place I've ever been, and I love living here. But like, I can't tell what he's done in 2 years. Can we tell what a mayor does? Like, maybe so. Everyone says New York City changes every time. I mean, I was gone for 24 hours, and yo, there's more blank coffee than I've ever seen before. I was getting blank coffees right and left, man. But like, at what rate of change do we want? When Mayor Adams became the self-proclaimed nightlife guy, I was thinking of maybe like easing. It's hard to run an establishment at night with like liquor licenses and noise complaints and tickets and cops busting up your party. All this stuff is like really hard to do business around. I thought he was going to villainize, or what, I'm missing the word, but I thought he was going to change the culture, maybe be like, guys, this is a part of the fabric of New York, and it's true it's a little noisy. We'll ask them to keep it down. Let's create new laws where we don't necessarily have to punish them for it. I thought small things like that would work, but from what we see, not so much.
I think it's hard to make any argument for the sort of Eric Adams regime other than being like seemingly pretty corrupt. Like, I'm not here making that accusation, but based on what we've read, that would seem to be something that could be an issue here, and has always been an issue in terms of what we're seeing in this article about the meals he's taking, but also who he's hired, who's got jobs, who's wives, and like, he's following in the rich tradition of Boss Tweed and other people people who've used this position to enrich themselves, and whether it's financially or via social life or via power and those around them. This is familiar turf in that regard.
Yeah.
And then also, we know that he is a cop, and he's continued and policies that we know are pretty destructive, and gone to like funnel more money to the police and take money away from schools. He has been this weird nightlife clown who has also simultaneously been very cruel and done nothing in terms of like housing, which has spiraled on during his tenure. He's been pretty vicious towards unhoused people. Hasn't done anything to change like the mistreatment of people in Rikers. I think you can only look at him as like an abject disaster at this point.
Maybe so. Yeah. To my previous idea, I can't tell quite, because this just seems like New York. And he
I'm with you. I don't think it changed the fabric of the city that much, but I think the places where changes could have been made, or his presence has actually been felt, you can see his fingerprints, have just largely been like really shitty.
Yeah, and he does not seem like a mayor, and I don't know, I'm trying to think of all the mayors that I've lived through, which is quite many, and none of them feel like independently minded politicians with ideas. All of them feel like, well, there's a conglomerate of powerful people, and they've chosen this guy to represent them. It's like the commissioner of the NBA. It is not a free-thinking position. It is a voice piece for the owners of the company.
Yeah, I don't think he has any particular values whatsoever. And I remember saying that when we did an interview with what was it for Vulture when Joy Basketball came out, and we were talking about Eric Adams in that interview. And I said, I don't know what his values are. I don't think he has any. I think he will go along with the police union. I think he will go along with real estate. I think he'll go along with whoever speaks with him last, and has a cigar with him at 2 a.m. And that person says, hey, I'd like a contract for this. And Adam says, oh, yeah, we'll work it out. I don't think he has any, code of ethics. Yeah. What the fuck is Eric Adams' belief system, man? I have no idea.
And I mentioned this at the time, and I still think so. The de Blasio pizza knife and fork thing and the Adams vegan thing are just misdirection. They're simple tricks by his PR company, or who does PR for him, to make that his identity in the conversation. And of course, he's not a vegan. Of course, de Blasio doesn't only eat pizza with a knife and fork, and who cares? But that's what we focus on. I think if you ask anybody what de Blasio was about, you'd be like, well, he worked out at a gym during isolation, and doesn't he eat pizza with a knife and fork? Isn't he from Boston? I'm like, yeah, all those things don't matter, right? But that's what we think about. Bloomberg didn't have that savvy, because when we think about Bloomberg, we're like, oh, he destroyed the city and gave it to the rich. I'm like, ooh, that's what you don't want us to think. It's like, well, did he eat a Parmesan that was breaded and deep fried into another Parmesan? Ooh, that rascal.
Was it one of the 3 true parms? So I think we've figured out the solution to our parm issues. Basically, Parmageddon, a permanent vacation.
Yeah.
So you sit down, you're like, am I getting a parm or am I getting a hero? What's coming out? Is this actually parmed, or is it just sauce and cheese on top of something and then tossed into the broiler? Like, what's happening? I want to know what it looks like. Now, technology has thankfully come up with a solution. There are now 3D menus that some companies are trying to roll out. And you look down at your plate, and it casts a small hologram of what you're going to order.
Star Wars style. Yeah.
And their selling point was no surprises. And I'm like, thank God. Because how many times have you gone into a place and you said, let me get a burger, and then and then a hot dog comes out, or a burger that's been cut into 50 different pieces and then fried into a pancake. Like, no surprises. That has been plaguing humanity since the beginning of the menu. You order food, you don't know what you're going to get. Let me get a steak. What comes out? A fish.
But you know what that does happen? French fries. Because sometimes it'll be like, in the picture, it looks like these are McDonald's-ass fries, my favorite, like the bright yellow, like processed ones. And then hand-cut fries come out. I'm like, oh, these are inedible. Throw them away or give them to the next sucker.
So you're saying it has a functionality, but it really just comes down to fries.
Oh, fries are important. Fries
but
are
this could also be... But the real issue here is that you're saying you see a picture of them, or it's a description is different. What take me through this fry scenario one more time.
So, some menus, if you're going to a not classy place, which we've all been to, for example, this weekend, I went to a place that didn't have a picture of fries. And I was like, well, what kind of fries are these, buddy? And he was like, well, they're like thin. I'm like, McDonald's or not? He's like, totally. I know what you mean. They don't have skin on them. They don't have like that soggy, weird Five Guys vibe. I'm like, cool, I'll take them. And they came out great. But to your point, all he had to do was say that. And all I had to do was ask. I do not like the fries at In-N-Out. If they look like In-N-Out fries, I will politely decline.
I guess what I'm saying here is that we've had the option of looking at photos at many like Chinese restaurants.
Sure, it helps
like
the gringos.
Storefront restaurants for a very long time. Taco trucks will do it as well. Mm-hmm. Like, there is a long tradition of showing people what they're ordering. That happens all the time. Mm-hmm. But not in fine dining establishments. And now we have the luxury of looking down and saying, oh, I ordered a trout parm. There it is. That looks delicious. I'll take 3. which we did not have prior to this
I'll
rise
take all
of
three
technology.
palms. Yeah. I mean, remember back when they invented X-rays, they were X-raying people's feet to try on shoes. I'm like, that's unnecessary. You could just like put on the shoes. I'm trying to think of when like augmented reality does help. I know some glasses websites will take a picture of your face. Never do that. Whatever you feel about surveillance, but if you do that, they put on like pairs of glasses onto your face so you can check out what you look like, which is always
there's a lot of those too. Like I feel like Home Depot maybe, or maybe even IKEA. You can use, your camera, and they'll place the item that you're thinking about putting it
Virtual
into
staging.
your room, and
Yeah.
you can stage it. Like, okay, that table would fit nicely there. It would go with my curtains or whatnot.
Sure.
But what's kind of a wild, and even looking at Mark Zuckerberg and his vision for Meta, Facebook's foray into the next Web3 development, and you're like, so it all sucks, and it all feels like stuff we've seen before for the most part. Yeah. And that was what was kind of wild about the hologram meal. You're like, all right, so this is just sort of, as you said, this is like Star Wars shit.
Yeah.
Like, it just looks sucky. Like, you're gonna sit there and this sucks, and we haven't. What's the reason for this disconnect? Why does so much technology feel almost retrograde? Like, you look at it, you're like,
All right.
this sucks. Zuckerberg is goofy avatar with like an Eiffel Tower behind it. Like, this sucks so hard, and it also just looks like 1992.
I mean, he's not an aesthetic guy. So what he's trying to do is turn everything into an emoji, a blank slate. So there's usability and there's connectivity between different kind of like tastes of aesthetic. And it just doesn't work. It looks cheap. It looks like Mario 64, which was one of the best games ever. But like, he's trying to simplify it in a way that is clever but just doesn't work. And I think the same way about like these Star Wars-esque solutions. No restaurant is going to do this because it puts an unnecessary contract on the table. When the food comes, you're like, that did not look like the hologram. What's the purpose of the hologram? Send it back. And you're like, get rid of the holograms. The first meal that happens is like, dudes, I cannot recreate every meal this way. I ordered 15 steaks and they all look different. If someone's unhappy with their steak, they're going to blame the damn hologram and we're going to pay for it. So it's never going to work, but it's just kind of like a viral thing to show us what's possible, sort of like a hoverboard. You can't kickflip a hoverboard because it's all these magnets and everything. Like, it just doesn't work as a concept, but it's cool to talk about that could be the future.
Well, yeah, that's true. I also have this suspicion that the reason guys like Zuckerberg and so many tech dorks really want to recreate humanity as cartoonish avatars is because they look stupid. Like, they've grown up their whole lives feeling like they look like a loser, that they're dorks. And they want to create a world where the advantages of people who are like more athletic than them, stronger than them, bigger than them, more attractive than them don't exist. And
This
I
is
feel
a
like that is
hilarious
such
idea.
that
Are
is-
you sure?
Yes, I am sure.
Wow. Okay. So they're projecting.
Why would Zuckerberg and all these nerds want to create a world where like everyone is just like an avatar of exactly how you want to look? The democratization of attractiveness, where
Because they're
everyone
trying
looks
to
exactly as good.
They're trying to straddle the world of business and aesthetic. So if you're too specific, then their bottom line is lower. Their ceiling is lower for the usability prospects, and that's
How
why.
did Zuckerberg start?
Well, it's different now. That was a long time ago.
That's right. But this is called checkmate.
Well, so nothing can change. The simulation goes just in a straight line, right? So I don't think this is nerds aspiring to be cool. I don't think so.
All I know is my checkmate has you on the ropes right now because you can't stop thinking about his entire career is based on starting a website that took photos of people and said, do they look good or not? And
But that's not what he ended up doing. Like, Amazon is not a bookseller, right?
Is it not?
Like,
His whole end game is to be someone who online people say this person looks good. Same with Jeff Bezos. Their entire thing. That's been the guiding principle, is that they grew up dorks and they don't want to be viewed as nerds.
ooh. I respect that opinion, but I think it's hilarious. But and I don't agree with it, but I'm gonna roll with it. No, I don't think that's the case. I think them individually, their psyches are completely different, right? Like, Bezos has turned into like the Chris Pratt, like, well, I sold books and now I'm rich beyond my means, so I'm gonna buff out. But like, Zuckerberg has remained the same acerbic nerd he's always been, even more so. I think he's like leaned into it. I mean, he is judgmental. He is worried about money. He's worried about status, all these things. And he's always been worried about it. I don't think he's judging people. I think he wanted power. And he has been the same since the beginning. Where I think your conceit is awesome and funny, I think you're misreading his original idea. His original idea, you're right, it has been a straight line. He wasn't judging the looks of people. He was trying to dominate and take power over their lives. And I think he's still doing that.
I think that's fair. That's a decent reading. It just is very suspicious. Very suspicious that all these nerds want to create cartoonish avatars to democratize attractiveness. Just seems suspicious.
I mean, but what is nerdy, right? Because, like, I have trouble with that because that is a dated idea, too. I consider Eric Adams nerdy.
We've talked about Revenge of the Nerds being the most damaging cultural artifact of the
You
last
have.
50 years.
I don't think it is. I think that's been lost a little bit. People don't really think about Revenge of the Nerds like we do. But Nathan Fielder, for example, not to go back to that, like, he's mining this bias, right? He leans into this bias, being like, oh, of course these subjects think I'm a loser. I'm gonna portray their projection myself as an actor. And I think it's a funny way to talk about that language. I have a tough time with nerds and cool guys as an idea because I cannot delineate the difference between the two. I cannot do it. Because, like, I'll see a very stylish person who's handsome or pretty walk in, and I'm like, oh, they're super nerdy. And I'll see a nerd walk in, and they're, like, super chill. I'm like, I'm very confused. You know, like, you abandon that by your 18th, 19th year on Earth, right?
All I know is this is the master plan.
Right.
The nerds are gonna take down the hot people. They've been trying to do this for decades, since Revenge of the Nerds made nerds feel as if they were virtuous. They were the good guys, and the bad guys were the people who were able to play sports and go on dates and live in a functional, society.
Oh, this is
people
a deep
who
reading of it.
hung out in the basement were actually the good guys. It gave birth to the incel movement. I'm saying it's all right there, as you said.
Ooh.
It's linear.
But the incels are the hardcore punks, right? Those are the cool ones.
Yeah, they're super cool.
Oh, in high school, like, they
No,
were the
they
ones
weren't.
in bands.
No, not the incels.
Well, this is what I mean. We were already in the 90s to the point where, like, the quarterback was, like, kind of mocked, right? And, like, I think this is Grill Masters coming after Steph Curry, being like, you nerds think you can run this? Why are you the good guys? It should be Udonis Haslem. He's the real one. Beef stew. A league full of beef stews is what I want. Not like these puny Trae Young types. Like, they're not real ballers, right? Like, that, to me, has not been true for a long time.
That seems like a reasonable segue to basketball.
Yeah.
After you've been checkmated.
Yeah, right. As we're posting reels on Instagram being like, those nerds. How
Asked
dare
you-
they nerd up my life? Post that reel, bitch.
quote checkmated into oblivion.
I bet you have an iPhone.
Well, first off, shout out to our buddy Lucian, who always helps
Hells
with
yeah.
the Cookies Classic, and he had his own annual summer basketball tournament out at Jacob Reese Park in the Rockaways
man.
this weekend on Saturday. We went out there; it was super fun, great time, like tons of familiar faces, really good caliber basketball, and the winner was Last Lap, who won
Again?
the
Oh
first-
my God, I was
the
gonna
first
ask.
Cookies Hoops tournament.
They're running the table, man.
I mean, sometimes I just joke with Lucian that we just throw tournaments so that Last Lap can come and win them. But it was a great time, super fun event. Jacoby was out there, Dan Solomito, our buddy Tommy, who's taken photos for us before. Basically the kind of support team that helped us do our tournament, they were all out there. So it was a great time. Really, really fun day at the beach. So shout out to Lucian and Mobadanga on a really fun event. And where I wanted to go from there was what's really cool about this week and the last couple weeks has been, despite being in the real bowels of the off season, like there's no basketball to be played for months, street ball and park basketball and off-season leagues have really kind of picked up the mantle over the last couple of years. You know, last night you had LeBron and Tatum went out to play in Jamal Crawford's crossover event, but I think it stopped because the floor had too much condensation, maybe because it was so crowded. But we've also had LeBron at the Drew, along with other NBA players like DeMar DeRozan. Jose Alvarado went to the Rucker last night and put up like
Dropped
67
72.
points. So,
Yeah.
something along those lines. You know, you've basically got, like, in Brooklyn, you've got Gersh Park. Uptown, you've got Dykeman and the Rucker. Like, is this the NBA's future for the offseason? Is this what we're looking for? Like, are they eventually just going to have to televise these games? Like, what's happening here?
Man, you know, like back in the day, I think Kobe went to Rucker once. I think KG played in some games. I don't think it's going to be popularized. You know, we always have this debate. Is the NBA the fabric or the name on the fabric, right? And I think the brand is important. I think these players balling is awesome, but I personally view it through the lens of like, yo, how's this going to look for this team? How's this going to look for the Hawks? How's Grand Theft Alvarado
and
looks
that's a
amazing.
good. Also, sorry, good example too, like Trae Young playing in tons of summer stuff, and along
Getting
with like John
cred.
Collins, etc. Yeah,
Yeah, building up his cred. You know, I think it helps on those streets and also in our minds, right? Like he's a real one, and I think it doesn't hurt to see these guys. But as I see Trae Young balling in these various pickup games, I'm not thinking like, oh, I want to see him. I'm like, well, what are the Hawks going to look like? You know, it makes me think of the Hawks and where's John Collins, all this stuff. And I don't think it's the future of the way to absorb basketball stuff, because I think the branding of the NBA is like pretty important.
I think the biggest concern is that someone really notable is going to get hurt in one of these
Yeah,
games.
100%.
And I don't know how bad he was hurt, but I think Chet Holmgren left the game early after like maybe stepping on LeBron's foot or something. Whatever, they collided during a fast break on like one of the first plays of the game and then left. And you know, we've had guys like Ben Simmons, for example, like break his foot or whatever it was in summer league.
Yeah.
And then missed a whole season. And I really love this idea of guys going out and playing during the summer, picking their own teammates. I would love for it to be streaming. I would watch some of it live. I think that would be really fun. That hasn't been the case other than that one Rucker game, I believe. Excuse me, I mean the Drew League. But I think it also does highlight that these guys are the talent, right? And even if you're looking at it and saying, well, how will this going to make the Hawks look? When you see these guys out there and they're freed of allegiances to teams and you don't really have, you know, any sort of rooting interest, and you watch how good they are, I think that's kind of the highlight. You know, you see LeBron out there going against someone who, is like a D1 player probably, and just like shed him with his shoulder and just go in for a dunk, and you're like, oh right, it's LeBron fucking James. Like, these guys are so good. Jose Alvarado going to the Rucker and just dropping 70 on people. Like, I think that's what's cool, is that it grounds the players in this way of, no, you can try to compare yourself to Lance, who can just like walk out here and do whatever he wants to all of you guys at any time. It's pretty sick.
And then you have the other side of the coin where the Knicks go out, like Randall, and like obviously they're doing a fan service thing and be like, just have Obi dunk a bunch and they'll win. We'll just walk off the court. And people read it as like, you guys are a bunch of chumps. Like, a bunch of non-NBA players beat you by that many points. And I'm like, that's why no superstars in the slam dunk competition. I think it has a low ceiling, and I don't want to talk about like money, but like, how do you do it? Let's say they broadcast Rucker Park. Then all of a sudden, players like Trae Young will be like, well, if you're going to sell ads, like, can I get a cut? And then you have to negotiate this whole thing. It's like, will you show up? I'm like, I'll show up for 5 games if you give me this amount of money. And I'm like, yo, this is a whole CBA issue, right? It's like, oh, you guys are going to televise it. I don't feel like playing tonight. It's like, well, then we don't have Trae Young, The Sprite's not going to want to advertise here. Allstate's not going to sell their sham services here. But I think it's a very complicated logistical thing. But I do think there's a ceiling, because Julius Randle's had to answer questions about how he got blown out or how he got beat. And he can't just say like, yo, I just came this to like meet everybody. I did this as a gesture of goodwill. I'm getting slammed. Like, that's the last time I do that for you guys.
Yeah, I think you are right that there's a can of worms about, well, who gets paid if,
Right.
I'm going to show up here and that's going to, make money for you. What's my cut of that if it's my celebrity that's doing this? At the same time, I think like technology getting better, like someone who's there can just go live.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
like, all right, sure. I'm going live. I'm watching the game, and we'll be able to get that experience in real time. I mean, I'm sure that's happening to some degree, but I just mostly mean like, I think there's a real opportunity for players to sort of express themselves outside of the team concept. I mean, look at how weird DeJounte Murray acted. I'm not even saying good or bad. Like, that's weird. It makes me think about him differently. That he was kind of just like flipping out in that like summer league game or pro-am game where he was like bouncing the ball off the guy's head. He was talking tons of shit to what's the rookie on Orlando, number 1 pick, Pablo
Banchero, yeah. Paolo
Banchero. Banchero, yeah. And just acting insane. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is a side of him that I haven't really seen when he was playing, under Popovich. Is this going to be unleashed in Atlanta? I don't know. I think we talk about the NBA as this, round the clock, this full season league, and I think this is kind of the next way for them to keep that up, because we have postseason, we have the draft, we have free agency, we have summer league, and then we have this sort of dead spot. And I feel like right now we're still getting NBA stuff. We're getting LeBron highlights. We're getting Trae Young, and that seems to be like the role of this period of time, especially in a year when you don't have, say, the Olympics or whatever.
I agree, and I think the NBA should encourage this and tread lightly, not to like overstep some sort of like moral CBA stuff, how they make money, but I think they like it. They also use this time to give awards to Celtics people too, so it's a time where we get to enjoy these superstars building up, or even just players building up their street cred, and also to create awards or honor the Celtics in different numerous ways. Let's retire number 8, Antoine Walker, employee. He makes baskets. Come on.
Our man Roof was saying, like, soon we're going to reach this sort of circular situation where, like, awards are being named after Celtics that they're being presented to. Like, that. What's it called? Like an Alma Burros or whatever that phrase is, the snake eating its own tail.
Sure.
Just like,
the
winner of the Tatum Award is Jason Tatum.
Right. This year's award, the Marcus Smart Award, goes to Marcus Smart.
That's the example that it refused, yeah. Yeah, before we get out of here, let's talk a little bit about Dame Lillard. Sorry. I just dozed off there.
I was just on
briefly.
the red eye. Were you saying something?
Yeah. So there's some dispute about whether Dame Lillard is a superstar or not, and this comes from a Taylor Rooks interview with Jason Tatum, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. It's the Jason Tatum show featuring Taylor Rooks and Jason Tatum. Yeah, so she the clip that went viral is she's like, well, I don't think Dame is a superstar, and Tatum was like level, clear-minded, was like, well, do you think Kyrie Irving is a superstar? She's like, absolutely. He's like, well, then you're just saying championships. If you win a championship, you're a star. And she's like, well, kind of, but Dame has to get closer. And she was giving Tatum some credit because he got to win a couple games in the finals, and like she was being gracious, in my opinion. Does she have a point?
Well, I think the main point is just how do you determine superstars? Because
Yep.
Joel Embiid has never won a title. He's never even gotten to the Eastern Conference Finals, but I think we would agree that he's a superstar.
Well, I would also agree that Lillard's a superstar, but honestly, there's just like 3 superstars, at any given time. And I think all the players you mentioned are all top 10, top 11, top 12, superstar for sure. Like a supermodel is just someone who's on the cover of a magazine, right? But then when we really get down into it, it's like 3 people. We're talking about people who can move the conversation of the entire league. Not just with a trade demand and with the market that they might be going to. I'm talking about like if LeBron James says something politically, like the president takes note. Or if KD decides on a whim he's not happy, like the whole narrative becomes about him. So there's only like Steph Curry. There's only a few.
I think I'm more lenient with my
Sure. Yeah.
categorization of them, because I would be like, well, so we're saying Giannis isn't a superstar?
Totally, right? Yeah, I don't know.
Like we're saying Jokic, like the back-to-back MVP, isn't a superstar?
All right, let me go out there. I don't think Giannis is a superstar. I don't. I think he's the best player on earth at times, and me and you definitely think so. But we're NBA heads. I think some people who don't follow the NBA, well, that's a bad metric. I don't think he moves those mountains like LeBron James.
But I agree. But these are also we're just talking about criteria, right?
And that's what Taylor Rooks is talking about, right?
Yeah, no, I understand that. If someone said, no, you have to be pretty much a household name to be what I consider a superstar,
yes, tough.
that it includes off the court notoriety. It includes your position as a star within the constellation of stars in other industries. That LeBron James is on the same level as like Robert De Niro within this ecosystem, but Giannis isn't, because Giannis is just not as well known. Even though he's a great player,
Yeah.
he just doesn't have that same cachet. I get that. I don't really think that same way. I think about it more sort of within basketball terms, but I get what you mean. Jokic is not a household name in the least.
No.
Like, people just don't know who he is.
Right.
And he is clearly a superstar in a basketball sense. So I don't know. I'd prefer just to go with the basketball sense, but I do get where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's tricky. I was thinking about this weekend because a non-basketball head, I mentioned to them that I do this perfect pod, and they were like, oh, how are the Knicks? I'm like, oh, they've been miserable for 20 years. It doesn't matter. And then they said out of nowhere, they're like, but what about Jeremy Lin? And I'm like, yo, what a superstar he was for that brief time. Cover of Time magazine, Sports Illustrated. This guy randomly does not care about basketball, just trying to humor me. Was like, but Linsanity, right? I'm like, absolutely. That was a weird moment. But Taylor Rooks, but also Jason Tatum, I think is more correct. Like Damian Lillard is a superstar for sure. Respect to an awesome short king. But I think her point is also she's changing the parameters of the discussion. That's why we do it, right? If someone enters the Hall of Fame, someone's got to go.
Lillard is kind of the toughest example for me to pin down, because we know he's capable of taking over a game or a series. We know he is a gifted scorer who can also pass the ball. In terms of smaller score first guards who can also act as a facilitator, he is capable of that. Even if he's not like a Trae Young, who is a basketball genius in terms of being a passer, Lillard's not that far behind it in that way, and he's proven to be a great scorer. At the same time, he is, I think, one of the weakest defenders in the league in terms of guys who play, 38 minutes, guys who are never going to leave the court in your biggest game. I don't think there are that many guys. Donovan Mitchell is there who are as much of a liability, who you have to put on the court. Like, there are guys who are worse defenders, like unitaskers, but they aren't guys who are going to be on the court for 40 minutes a game. Right. And those guys are. And I don't know too many guys who fall into that same category as the guys we've just talked about, Trae, Dame, and Mitchell, in terms of just bad defenders who are really excellent offensive players. So, I do think Lillard is a superstar if we're using a looser kind of criteria, but I'm actually not sure if he's even like a top 15 player, if that makes sense, because he just can't defend, because he can't rebound, he can't protect the rim. Like, there are just certain vulnerabilities that come with being 6'2", and like, you've got people like Chris Paul who are anomalies, just incredible defender for his height, who can lead the league in steals, who can actually defend in the post, who can draw charges and do all these great things defensively, but they're very, very rare. I don't know. I just have such skepticism towards the short kings of the NBA, even though I acknowledge like they can be great on offense. There's just certain stuff they often can't really do.
I mean, I think I have to check, and this is no way to prove, but I think the value of players 6'3" and under is equivalent to the amount of good players who are 6'3" and over. I think it's probably the same proportion in terms of like WAR or like nerdy stats, or even eye test, right? Like, we're omitting Steph Curry, who I think is a secret good, solid defender for his size, and just like the best nuclear offensive player I've ever seen and might ever see. He is probably better than most guys taller than him. So does he get extra, right? Because he has that disadvantage. But tall guys like can't dribble, and good luck with that. Like, the Boston Celtics kind of found that out real quick in the finals against a certain defense. I think the proportion is the same. I am standing up for the short king. I am standing up for the misinterpretation of the Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, it's weird because, like, when you got checkmated earlier. No, but thinking about like the Raptors model.
Player? Jiscovili, was he Czech? No,
I don't know.
No, he's Russian.
No. I think he was Georgian.
Yeah, you're right.
Like that.
There's no Czech player. Anyway, I gotta do.
Might be.
Yeah.
But you look at the Raptors and their idea of putting, a whole bunch of 6'8", 6'9" guys out there, and they didn't really have a ball handler, and you could, when Van Vliet was off the court.
Oh, okay.
Because he was hurt.
I was gonna say.
And yeah, no, right. And it didn't quite work when you don't have a Van Vliet. Like, the idea of going all 6'9" doesn't really work unless you have maybe a LeBron James. But you also definitely can't go like all 6'2". It would just be preposterous. So like, I do think there is a built-in advantage for the taller guys, but yes, you have to have that skill set. My general philosophy on like those smaller guys is just that there are so many guards in the league who have the ability to dribble the ball, the ability to get where they want on the court, the ability to knock down shots. I just have my skepticism towards that variety of player as a superstar, unless they are a total freak, unless they're Curry, unless they're
Chris Paul.
Chris Paul. Because honestly, I think Lillard and Kyrie are about as good as you can get. And I don't think either of them is good enough to carry a team to like a title.
Ooh,
I just don't think they're that good. And they're both great.
But single-handedly, this is the LeBron debate, right? Like, Kyrie wouldn't have one without LeBron, but LeBron wouldn't have one without Kyrie. Like, how do we do this?
LeBron would totally have one without Kyrie.
In that
titles without
moment
Kyrie.
against
He's
the
had them
Warriors.
since.
But he's had other
sure.
small kings with him, right? Like he does not do this always alone. Like Dellavedova hit some big shots, like he always has this guy Steve Kerr, Paxson, this role of the small.
Oh, sure. No one is saying you can't have small guys out there like who are shooters and they don't have value. I think they do. It kind of goes back to the idea of a superstar. Like, is Lillard a superstar if you can't build a title contender around him? And I don't know that you
But
can.
you can.
And
I think you can. They just haven't.
I don't know.
I mean,
we'll see. But
what was his
but
best running
who's-
mate?
But I guess what I'm saying is, other than CP3 and Chris Paul, what is one example of a short guy who has been the best player on his team that has been a legitimate contender?
Allen Iverson.
I mean, like, right, we're going back 25 years.
Steve Nash.
I don't even, was he the best player on that team? Maybe.
I mean, I know.
Maybe. No, these are good examples.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a great point because, like, there's an evolutionary aspect to the game, like going small or whatever, that has occurred. And this skill set of a dribbler, a spot-up shooter, the three-point line has changed the way rosters are constructed. And you don't have many big guys who do big guy stuff anymore. And you say there's a proliferation of small guards who do the same thing, which is get buckets, but that's evolutionary, right? That is the way teams are constructed. Like you pause this draft even in itself. There was a lot of guys who did that, like Mathurin and whatever. You can go down the whole list.
No, totally. I'm just thinking that, like, when those skills that were once dedicated to guards start being possessed by guys who are bigger, and this is sort of the LeBron effect in a lot of ways, then you end up with guys like Harden who are bigger, guys like Doncic who are bigger, guys like Giannis who can pass and get to the basket. And you start saying, well, the skills that those little guys used to have that was solely their domain, ball handling, passing, facilitation, being a pure point guard, are now combined into these guys who are 6'8" and also scorers and also can defend and rebound and, get the board, push out on the break, find someone in the corner for three, or go to the rack themselves. Like, it kind of defrayed in some ways, like the positional responsibilities of like the little guard, if that makes sense.
I'm going through the last championship teams and because I started thinking of Kyle Lowry, and it's like, it's true, the best Bucks player is kind of an odd hybrid, but also like Drew Holiday. All these championship teams have upper tier guard play, right? And
totally matters. I'm
like
only
Steph
talking
Curry
about, like,
single-handedly, I would say, won them a chip this year. Like, he just went nuclear
but
and
he
was
is,
over.
but he's the best shooter who's ever lived. I'm
But
mostly
we
talking
can't
about,
omit
like,
the good ones, right? Like, if we omit like the outliers like Chris Paul and Steph Curry, we're omitting two great examples.
But what makes Luka a superstar in the way that Dame isn't? When we look at it,
Are
and
we
say,
sure
oh,
he is? Like,
I think so.
I think so in terms of like charm and gravity and celebrity. But
Well, I'm not talking about celebrity. I'm saying on the court. I look at Luka and say, you can build a title-winning team around this guy. I don't look at that and say, you can about Dame. But maybe it's just because Dame is older and we haven't. I just don't see it. I don't look at a team
Dame's
and say,
gotten
oh,
farther.
this is a Lillard machine.
But to Dame's credit, he's gotten farther in the playoffs than Luka. It's early. And Dame's best player ever alongside him was C.J. McCollum. And he suffers kind of the same fate as Luka has so far, which is he seems to be on an island, and it's like this heliocentric model out of necessity, not choice.
But, well, I mean, Dame didn't get further, did he?
Did he make the Western
they-
Conference Finals one year?
Yeah, so Luka did this year.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, so it's the same, right? Like, they have not reached the finals. Like, Luka's amazing. I love Luka, but to give Dame his credit, like, they're kind of in the same tier, even at Lillard's age and injury, around 7, 8, 9.
Yeah,
10, right?
I don't know. I just so disagree with that, but whatever. I just
love
don't believe
Luka.
in short kings.
I know you hate short players, and Steph Curry, watching him drop bombs. Ooh, it got into you. Who's on the
All
ropes?
right. Well, checkmate. You got me. We'll be back with more chess talk next. Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.